a playlist original.
Our family grows. The city itself will be our playground to use as we please. Rewarding ourselves and punishing our enemies.
We've been looking for you, Miss O'Neill.
There is a new enemy. Freaks of nature. Together, we will punish these creatures.
What the heck was that?
Looked like sort of a big turtle in a trench coat.
Awesome!
Yeah! I love being a turtle!
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to an episode of Back to the Apocalypse with your hosts Gaius and Jackson, taking us back to a very, I guess, nostalgic time in my life. 1990 in March. Jackson wasn't even like thought of yet. I
Nope.
guess
I was still a long
not
ways
even
off.
yeah, not even a twinkle in your mother's eye when the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie came out in March. Actually, the date is what, March 30th, 1990. It's interesting because like doing this one, I was hoping that it was our listeners' pick. I didn't want to choose it outright because like we had I had another choice based on like we had a guest. So all right, we'll do that one. But I was like, I really want to do Ninja Turtles, and like the only way I think people will vote for it. However, the Hunt for Red October got a lot of votes too, so it was close, and we totally would have done the Hunt for Red October, and I was like, yeah, that's what you picked. Let's go with it. But I'm really glad you guys picked this one because I wanted an excuse to relive this movie. I've seen it a lot. Now there's been like gaps of like time where like I haven't watched it in a while, but
Right, I
I've
would
seen
imagine.
it. I could have easily done this episode and not have watched it because I just remember everything about
Is
it.
that right, eh? Wow, that many
Yeah,
times?
it's like
Nice.
so embedded in my memory. Like I said, when we were talking about doing this one with my friends, like we know lines from the movie still, and it's just so crazy. Like certain things that kind of stick with you, even like when you get older. It's just like such a part of like not just like the pop culture zeitgeist, but once you grow up with something, and depending on how long it's kind of in your life, like it's
Mhm.
it's easy to kind of have like just like an instant memory of like I remember that line, I remember that scene, and it's kind
Yes.
of cool to kind of have that still. And like it's nothing wrong with maintaining a little bit of your childhood, even though you're older. Like it's still like a nice uh thing to look back on, and also kind of nice to look at it now as someone who's older. Like, oh, am I looking at this through like nostalgia lens? Is it just because like the kid in me that likes it? Is it actually a good
Mhm.
movie? Like you start to like think about it differently. Um, so it was interesting, kind of wanting to approach it on with you on this because like it's going to be way different from you because I grew up with it. I tried to like I asked my mom usually when we cover like stuff that's kind of this old, like
Right.
do you remember what it was like? Did you take me to go see it? Blah blah blah. And it was so weird. Like when she described it, I kind of had like a kind of like total recall to like just remembering a little bit of seeing it in the theater. I was young, like when it came out, because like she immediately was like, "Yeah, you maybe take it to see it 3 times." And I remember at least 2 of them
Oh
were
my
at
God.
the yeah. And she's like, I remember at least one of them was at like the actual drive-in. Like I haven't done that in like forever. Like we don't really like
Mm,
those became big again during COVID because it was another way to go
right.
to the
We have
movies
one
and
not
stuff.
far from where I live as well, and it was awesome to go to as a kid.
Yeah, and she was like, that's how I was like, I instantly was like, oh yeah, I do kind of remember that. That's so crazy. Um, and I was like, and when she's telling me this, she was like, well, I'm looking at her like, were you upset that you had to take me to see this movie 3 times? And she was like, I mean, she's like, it wasn't for me. You had fun for sure, but you were just insistent on like, first I took you to see it with just me, and then you wanted to go see it with your friends, so I took you guys again, and there was like another set of friends that wanted to go see it. She was like, I had no
Man, your
choice but
mom's
to be like,
awesome.
yeah, she was like, I had no choice but to be like involved in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mania for a bit. But like she thought it was fun. She's like, it's not her favorite movie by any means, but she's like it was fun for what she remembers about it. And
Yep.
certainly not made for her, but like, she knows it was made for younger people. Now, interesting is she did comment on this that she thought like it'd be interesting to talk about. It's an interesting adaptation of this because it is closer to like the comic book that kind of
Yeah.
it's as far as like the style and it being a little, I'm not saying it's like Batman dark, but it's definitely a little greedier than
But
like
for a like
yeah,
kids property, I did appreciate how darker, I guess you could say, because it's very much, I think, a kid-oriented movie. But like, just they don't make kids movies like this anymore, and that was very evident. So I could appreciate that while I was watching it.
yeah. And it's interesting to like look back on. I think that is the most unique thing about it because like I am watching it and I was like, dude, this is like almost like a crime thriller for kids. So like it just takes place in like a crime ravaged New York City and like
Yeah.
and somehow, some way, I mean, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you think it all completely works. But I was like, they don't. It's interesting. They find a line like really to not take it too seriously, but they take it seriously just enough where it's just like you go with like, okay, this is. They make you
Mhm.
buy it. It's not just silly like oh like these kind of characters are in this. Is like oh this is just weird. Like they make them kind of feel like an honest like breathing part of the environment where it doesn't feel like oh this just feels like out of place or like oh they're trying too hard. Like it
Mm.
has just the right touch to me to be like oh like I'm going along with it and it's just like I mean I can understand why it was a tough sell initially when they were trying to pitch it to studios because they were like hey like we know the cartoon's popular but like clearly what they were doing was not clearly just the cartoon. There's definitely elements where you're like yo it's a children's movie but
Right.
they're like, hey, we want it's Teenage Mutant Turtles, and like it's kind of like we want to take elements from the cartoon show, but we kind of want to keep it in line with the comic book, which is a little darker. So they're trying to sell it to us here, like, so you want like a little bit of a gritty children's film about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles who are like brought up and mentored by their sensei, who's like a giant rat, and like that's what they were trying to like. I actually
Right.
read a thing in the Hollywood Reporter when they were like, I guess pitching the studios, and they said that was kind of like what they were told back, like this is what you want, and then they kind of like, well, yeah, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like so many people turned it down, and like we are like, yeah,
Okay. And
it's like
I
not,
don't find that shocking, but I do find it surprising that it was as much of a pitch as it sounds like it was, considering the popularity of like the 80s cartoon was going strong at the point that this was in development.
yeah,
It came out in 1990, and I think the show started in 87 and it was
87,
all the rage, it sounds like. So I would have
yeah,
thought this would be like par for the course, like logical next step. Let's pump this out in the theaters where it actually stands a chance at bringing in a lot of box office dollars, which it absolutely did. I was really surprised to see how well this movie did, even worldwide. The gross compared to the budget was like pretty significant. So I honestly didn't know what to make of it while I was watching it. I didn't do any research into it.
yeah.
I mean, the
So
budget I
you're
think
going in
speaks for
completely
itself.
blind.
Well, completely. This is something I was kind of waiting to say is that I was obviously very much aware that this movie existed. I definitely haven't seen it front to back, so this was a first time watch, and I watched it today as of recording. But I think this
Yeah,
is one of those movies that, like, growing up, I would have seen like clips of, like, on, like, I don't know, Teletoon or like one of like the kids TV
right.
networks, like on
Like
weekends or
random
something.
scenes and stuff.
Yeah, because like there was definitely parts that came back to me, like, that I had seen, or maybe it was in like YouTube video snippets when I'm like watching random like Watch Mojo videos or something. I can't really tell. But what's interesting about this, and I don't think we've had a movie quite like this that we've discussed before that really bridges the gap between you and I, because although this movie is before my time, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was still enormous when I was a kid. I grew up on the 2003 show. Like, I was watching that all the
Yeah,
time. My mom still remembers how much I love that show. There was a video game on the original Xbox that I was fortunate enough to have as a young kid that Cam and I would play religiously. We hung out. I've known him since kindergarten, right? 5 years old. And
yeah,
we would play that game. So like that, the IP of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a huge part of my childhood as well as yours, just different formats of it. So I wasn't as
yeah,
familiar with the live action 90s movie, although I knew it existed and I'd probably seen bits and pieces. But I grew up on the animated show, not the 80s one, but the 2000s one, and
yeah,
just loved the IP. So watching it and seeing how much the 2000 show was also very much like stuck to the comic. A lot of the same story beats, characters, and just plot elements were present in this movie that we're talking about today, that the kid in me could appreciate it and look at it through a nostalgic lens, even though I didn't feel like the movie had much to offer, like filmmaking wise, which I obviously went
Yeah.
in not expecting that anyway. It wasn't that kind of watch where I was like, oh, I would totally dissect this and look at its deeper meanings and themes. It
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
like, which is like kind of hard to shut my brain off because that's like how I generally approach movies. So I'm not
Right.
gonna lie, I did struggle while watching this like clearly outdated. I use that term loosely because like I know
Yeah.
it's
I
a
mean,
product of its
it
time.
feels very
Yeah,
1990 as well. Like
but
it's
I
a
also
product of
love
when
that
it came
it
out.
has a charisma to it. I love that they did like the rubber costumes and didn't bother trying to do it any other sort of way. Like as much as it looks dated now, I still think that it had its charm and it worked.
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks ridiculous like looking back at it. But if you're just watching it for a product of the early 90s, probably filmed in the late 80s, like I love that. I love the approach that they took to the
Yeah.
turtles. Like all the characters were the familiar characters to me that I knew and loved. Just I haven't really seen this iteration of them before.
Yeah.
So you know what? I thought it was all around like a good time for like childhood Jackson to see this. So I
Yeah, to
felt
kind of see
content.
like a
Yeah,
different like almost iteration of like something that you already are feel familiar with, but like
exactly.
it's interesting too because I know there's like a lot of different ways we can kind of discuss it, but I thought that's a good point that you made that like it is we cover like late 90s movies, right? And that's a little bit. I mean, of course, that's something like I grew up with like as a teenager, like all those teen movies and stuff, and like you didn't
Right.
really grow up with them, but this is like a little different too, like you said, because like even though you definitely weren't thought in your mom's eye at the time when the movie came out. Ninja
Right.
Turtles has like survived as an IP for years. It's still very popular
Like
and
we're going on
continues
40
to be.
years. Yeah, which is crazy.
So it almost reminds me like I'm not of course not familiar or watch Power Rangers anymore, but that's another one. If you were that was
Yeah.
something that I liked as a kid that still is around today and totally different you know form now like and now it's
It's
to the
actually a
point where
great
they've actually
comparison to this.
yeah, they've actually in a weird way it makes you like I mean it's happy for the older actors, but now you have like versions of like the show where like the older actors from the original Power Rangers show are like making appearance on like the newer version. So it's like God, it's so weird.
Mm,
Like it's this full circle kind of thing, and like and it if something appeals, especially with kids, if it appeals to children in a significant way and it's still like creatively viable, you can get lucky and have something that can span years and different generations, and it
mm,
just finds like a brand new audience, and like that's really interesting and really I think unique, but like lucky for like if you have an IP that can do that. I mean, I don't think everything kind of can, and like this certainly does. And it's interesting because like I haven't watched everything post some of the like early movies and stuff, but there's still like the general idea where it's not like they're not like all carbon copies of like what they were doing before, but like
mhm.
the same like kind of elements are still there that kind of make it work. Like there's like the kind of like the bond between the brothers. They all have like unique and distinct personalities. So like of course when you're a kid, you're like everyone's like, well, I want to be Leonardo, I want to be Donatello, I want to be Raphael, I want to
Leonardo
be
was
Michelangelo.
the turtle that I always identified with the most. I loved him.
Yeah, I was like talking to my I was always want to be that one too. I was always Leonardo. We were talking about today before I came to do this with you, and my buddy was like Raphael all the way, and like one of the girls was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, you're a
Raph's
rep."
awesome too.
Yeah, one of the girls was like, "You're a rebel. You're a trouble. You got edge." I was like, "That was so funny," but like, yeah, he was the like to say problematic, but the one that had the most like he didn't want to always follow the rules because he had like he's very like I want to do things this way, and like he's more a little bit proactive without maybe thinking, but like
Right.
he's the one that kind of doesn't follow the rules much and like
And
challenges things. So like there's a lot of like different personalities that you can think of for yourself. Or like, oh, I'm
yes,
more of that. So like I
he
think
is the
that is really
character with
like
the
using
most depth, I would say, as well. Like he's the least
yeah.
one-dimensional turtle.
Yeah, for
Sounds
sure. And
funny
it's so
saying it out loud like
weird.
that.
Like it's so
Yeah.
weird. Like I mean, like it is interesting to hear you say it like that, but there are scenes, like especially with him, that have no business at least going as like potentially deep as they do. Like there's a conversation in the movie that he has with Splinter where Splinter's basically telling him like he has all this like rage and stuff like that. And it's not like
Yeah.
it's not like peak cinema writing, but it's like, wow, they actually like went there a little bit in a children's film where this father figure is kind of like addressing like, I can see all this in you and like how much he
Mhm.
loves him despite all that. I was like, that good for them for like, going after that. And
Yeah.
it's not like, you can ignore that in the children's movie, like, yeah, kids aren't interested in this. Like, let's get to the fun stuff. And I was like, there is a genuine attempt to like give the movie some depth. Like I don't know how I'll feel discussing it by the end, but one of the things that my friends want me to peg down was like whether or not I think it's a good film. Like, is it like solid filmmaking, right? And
Right.
I'll probably like figure it out as we're talking about it. But like there are different moments where it's like that's way more depth than like, you would think from like, a child like adaptation of something like this. Like they took a moment to
Mhm.
actually have a serious moment like that. And there's like different moments like that too. Like there's a scene like towards the end where they have like, they call up that vision of Splinter and he like it's talking to all of them before they decide to go back. And they after the whole thing with Raphael, and then like and that's also kind of dark too. Like basically in a coma for like a bit after he gets in like a
Yeah.
big brawl with the Foot Clan, and like it's not like I like cried or anything, but I was like, whoa, this is like an emotional scene, and they actually have the turtles actually being emotional and emoting. They're crying after they have
Yeah.
this like they have this like bonded, brotherly vision to him, and like, not a bunch. I don't know. I just like they even took the time to do it. It may not work completely for
Mhm.
everybody, but it is like, they're working with a lot more than just like, let's just like show a bunch of fights and make it like wacky. I mean, of course, there is some of that in the movie. It is a
Yeah.
children's
It
movie
is
and it
very
needs to be
wacky
funny,
and zany at times,
but
without a
it is
doubt.
an interesting like unique dichotomy. And I kind of like wanted to like with you like ask you like, did all that work for you? Where you're like, okay, this is interesting because like it's dark by like, as dark as a movie like that can get. Um,
Right. Especially
it's
more by
ground
today's standards. Yeah.
yeah, it's grounded in like as much of reality as it can be. Like the whole thing with Shredder and the Foot Clan is just like I don't know what the total intention is, but like basically like growing a series like thugs who are just stealing shit. They're all like teenagers, and like I don't know what the like kind of end game with it all was, but it was like it felt like much more like this is like a children's movie. That this seems like legit, like this is like true crime a little bit, like so they
Mm.
try to ground it in as much reality as it can, and and God bless them, they even make the whole like thing with like Shredder, the thing when like Splinter was young, they try to give that a little bit of depth too.
Yeah.
It's like a little cheesy, but like they went for it, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it's not all gonna work, but I wanted to ask you like kind of like what was it like for you to be like, oh god, this is a odd combination of like this seems real, and then this is just a little ludicrous but fun.
Um, it's impossible for me to really say if like I'm answering because I grew up on the show and that's my first exposure to the IP, and like that is like the medium with which I was first introduced to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If that's why I think that this IP is better served as an animated show rather than live action.
Right.
But that's like my inclination, is that like it most of like how it appeared on film like didn't really work for me. Like the points that I award this movie are from like nostalgia and like
Yeah.
how it reminded me like just the familiarity of being back with these characters that I spent so much time with as a kid, and how nice it was to, and like just the creative endeavor of bringing it to the big screen. I can appreciate that. But all in all, I would say like mostly like it didn't really work. Like I did find like, it cheesy. A lot of the dialogue like didn't, like, while I agree like the writing was strong in some places, like as strong as it could be, like you said, there's a lot of like great character moments for like on the surface what appears to be a really wacky, ridiculous concept. Like
Yeah.
I've always loved, and what I've always appreciated about the name is how upfront the title of this show and movie and series is called. Like
Yeah.
it is what you're getting. You're getting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's hilarious to say out loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, the writing does kind of surprise me in some places, and I think, but again, that is also coming from a comic series where I feel like a lot of that the stronger elements of this movie are adapted from something else. So like it's also hard for me to kind of award points. But
Yeah.
all that to say, like I do think, as much as I love the IP, like this isn't the format of it that I would like really go back to. I do think it's stronger as animated, because of the limitations, at least at the
Right.
time. I know that they've done, like, there was a 2014 iteration of this, which I did see back in the day, but I'm so far removed. Like I'm not really under any impression that it was great, but I feel like
Are those the
maybe
ones that like Michael Bay like produced like the
yes, exactly. Megan
yeah.
Fox is in it, and I think there's a couple
Yeah,
other like
I actually
really
saw both of them, and I remember being in the moment, being like, "Oh, this is fine." I hated the way they
yeah,
looked, though. I mean, that was like
yeah.
that was
I
a.
hated the appearance. That was
Uh,
tough.
I
Worse
was
than
like,
like
if
the Sonic
anything,
Hedgehog.
yeah, if anything, essentially because like them being in the suits like this in this original one, yeah, it
Mm.
feels a little dated and like it's all right, but it is like I think that looks better than what they ended up doing with like the Michael Bay stuff later. Like
I
you know,
mean,
like it's
I agree. I hate the
like
Michael
like
Bay
like give me
version
rubber suits
design.
over like this weird like scary
Yeah,
CGI versions of them, which was like and they're all big and bulky for some reason, like
I know they're
hulking kind of
massive.
characters.
Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
look like
Um
what you think teenagers would look like, right?
right. And I guess like, you know, I speaking of it being a part of this time, like, you know, the Jim Henson's like Creature Shop did the suits
Mm.
and everything. So like, you know, they still got like a top-notch company to do the stuff with the suits. And like, you know, it was a combination of like they had to have some that the actors in the suits could like move around in. They had to be able to freely do the stunts and fight choreography. And I know it's so weird to say fight choreography because like it's not like
Yeah, it's not.
it's
It's not much, but it
I
is something. You got
yeah
cartwheels, you got kicks, you got jumps.
yeah
Like I was actually impressed with what they did pull off because when I first saw the shots and like the early scenes of the turtles, I'm like, what are these actors going to be able to do in these big rubber
yeah
turtle
like
suits?
how
I was
much can their
impressed.
movement like be like you know
Yeah,
limited or anything and like they are pretty spry and I say like martial arts loosely because I'm like I don't know if this is like you know
it's a
definitive
bit of a
like
reach to say that.
martial arts techniques like I'm watching this I was like man like a real martial artist probably like this is sloppy but I mean whatever we'll go with it it's not like horrible by any means but it's like you know kids should be learning like how to like do martial arts from watching this but I think
I
like you
think it's
said
great
like
for inspiration for them to be interested in that. This would be
yeah
where maybe people got interested in pursuing some martial arts as kids, but by no means should
yeah
it be an instruction manual.
at all. But I do agree with you. There's a free kind of flow to like the movement. They're not limited to like they're actually moving around enough where it's like you
Mm,
kind of like almost forget that you're watching someone in a suit. They have a lot more life than you would probably expect, I guess. And
mm.
that's a combination of them having like suits that the actors can move around in, and then they actually had you know when there's like close-ups and having like actually have their eyes move and their mouths move.
And the
There were
mount, yeah, I know.
different
I was like,
there were different kind of setups for that. And I think it's you know again it's 1990, but I think for what the time it actually looks as
mm,
good as it could look. And you know I really don't think about like I think the hard sell too when they were trying to pitch it was like we don't know what this is going to look like entirely in live action. I think that was like the tough thing. Like okay, we get it as an animated show, and I think it would have been easier to like maybe green like this if they're like okay we're going to do it straight adaptation of the animated show and either make it a cartoon or even if you did make it live action, just make it as like kind of like all the way kid friendly and stuff like that. Where that's what they kind of did with the second movie. The second movie is like way more kid friendly, less dark. They don't even let the
okay.
turtles. They don't even let the turtles use their weapons in the second one because
Well,
that
that was another
that was a
thing is
yeah
that I wanted to touch on afterwards.
yeah,
Is
because
the
that was a big
weapons.
complaint. Because, like, you know, yeah, this movie made a lot of money. Parents definitely took their kids to see it, but there was a pocket of like parents who were like, it was too violent for their kids, and there was a lot of complaints about them actually like using their weapons in the first
Okay.
one. I think something like that is silly to complain about, but there was like a lot of watchdog parents that thought it was too much for
Yeah,
you
that's
know for the
silly to
target
me.
audience, right?
There is
Yeah,
zero bloodshed in this movie. There is
right.
that,
And
which
like,
I mean, I get it's a kid's property, so like it's stupid to say have this as a complaint, but I'm like, even more so in the video games and the animated show that I watch, like I know they're used like two of them have bladed weapons, and we're not seeing those really. We're seeing them
right.
use like sticks. I'm like, it's just kind of hard to watch sometimes.
Yeah,
Like,
I think the only time, like, I think Leonardo's the only time it makes contact with flesh. Leonardo's like sword like clips Shredder's arm, and I think that's like the only time
oh,
you really see
yes,
like a flesh wound is not even like a real bloody one either, right? So I think they did what they not. It's not. It does. I mean, I guess you can say it's could be violent for young children at that time, like.
yeah,
But
maybe
I mean, they're not impaling anybody. I don't know. Like it'd
exactly.
be I think like sometimes when you get like situations like that, it's like, all right, calm down. I know you want to like kind of monitor what your kids are watching, but it seems so silly now that like that was like, oh, it's too violent. I mean, You also see a movie called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're gonna fight. They're ninjas. I don't know.
Well, yeah, the fighting is pretty. I'm trying to think, like vanilla, I guess. Like this felt
yeah,
totally appropriate for kids. If anything, like there were moments where the humor was like a little bit over like kids' heads, but it was pretty
yeah,
harmless. Like you're never gonna like no 5-year-old's gonna understand Raphael's line about now I know what it's like to travel without a green card. Like that is a
yeah,
hilarious adult friendly joke that isn't, gonna like do anything for a kid. So I appreciated little moments like that I definitely wouldn't have got if I was the target audience watching this. So part of
yeah,
that was helping reel me back into some of the duller moments where I was like, "Okay, I am watching."
yeah. And some of
You
the
know,
jokes are kind of well placed. I mean, it's not like it's like some of the jokes are like groundbreaking, but it's just delivery when like Casey Jones when they all meet him for the first time when that's that big fight after Raphael gets in his big brawl, and he's just kind of they haven't met him before, but he's there, and they're like,
right?
"Who is this guy?" And Michael Evans was just like casually goes like, "Wayne Gretzky on
On
steroids," and that's just
steroids,
it.
yeah, that was
Yeah, yeah.
awesome.
And it's just like the timing was just good, and like it's not like a groundbreaking joke or anything. Just like the delivery made it
Hmm.
funny, and that's a joke that kind of like could work for like older people who are like more familiar with like hockey and all that, even kids too. But like it would just
Yeah,
hit in a different way. There is a I only want to mention it now because I don't want to forget it. There is a weird out of place joke that like I was like, why did they write this? But it's when they are coming back and they have to like go stay in like the sewer and like Casey
the
Jones like does
claustrophobia joke.
yeah, and he was like, "You're claustrophobic," and then he said something like, "I never looked at another man in my life," and I was like,
Yeah, he gets offended by it. And I thought
"Yeah,"
that
I was
was
like,
out of place but hilarious and
"Yeah,
not like it didn't really like maybe today it might be considered offensive, but I think in the time it didn't really cross the border of being crude.
yeah,
But I thought it was like, oh, that is a sneaky little adult friendly joke in this kids
yeah."
movie that I laughed at.
It's also I think it might have like been like okay because like in a roundabout way, like he says claustrophobic was I guess supposed to sound more like homophobic, but the way that he is like responding to it, is not like and like total like homophobia. He just says like I never looked at another man in my life, which like just implies that he thought he was like gay. So like they're using it
Right.
wrong, but like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
close enough where it's like oh we know what you tried to do there. I just think it's kind of
Right.
an interesting thing that they just dropped, and I do laugh at it because it's just so like that was bold. I mean like whatever. I mean it's just so random though to like
It
throw it
is
in there.
random.
Like I think that sometimes like adults they like write these movies. They're like I need one for me.
Yeah,
Just to see
and
if this
that
like
is
will be like
exactly what that joke was in there for. That was one for the dads that brought their kids on that weekend to go watch it to have
yeah.
a good laugh.
Yeah. And like we said, it came out next year, March 30th. The plot is pretty standard.
Hmm.
It stars Judith Hogue and Elias Cotis. They're the only real like human. Well, they have other human characters, but they're like April O'Neil and Casey Jones are the ones we see the most. As far as, and I actually think they do a good job of incorporating them. Of course, you're there to see the Ninja Turtles, but I actually think
Right.
they do a decent enough job of like making the like you know, fit in well and they like actually interact with them well enough where it feels like a genuine kind of like relationship and stuff and you buy it and it's good enough for
Yes.
what it is. Um and yeah, it just follows the turtles on a quest to save their master Splinter with their new allies April O'Neil and Casey Jones from the Shredder and his Foot Clan. It's also like it's a very dangerous time in New York City. It's I guess like it's very a lot of crime, a lot of stuff's going on, and I love how like chaotic April O'Neil's like reporting job is because like her boss is just like she's just like I guess you're supposed to buy that she's just like she wants to like break like real stories and she doesn't really care about like what they should say. They're basically like just say this so we like you know rub anyone the wrong way, and then like she just does the opposite of that. It's and you just actually I mean I know New York City at the time isn't like especially during that time, probably was a lot of crime and stuff, but like
Hmm.
it feels like a really interesting, like almost not, I hate to say over exaggeration, but like this New York City in this universe is just
Yes.
like an interesting crime ridden one where it's like I said, you have to buy that. When you watch like the Foot Clan on the cartoon, that it's not like they're not like some crime syndicate, and
No,
Shredder
they
is
work in the
definitely not.
shadows. They're not like
Yeah,
it's not all up and like out in the open for like reporters to comment on. It feels like very much like a crime syndicate, like you just said,
yeah, and
underground
Shredder
stuff.
is definitely not some like crime boss, right? But that's what they went for here, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because they don't provide, like I said, a lot of like what the hell is like the actual end goal for Shredder and like kind of
Yeah.
molding these kids
There's
to
not
do
much
this? Like
there for his
they're like
character.
they are honestly just like stealing shit and just causing trouble. And I don't know like if it's just the kind of maybe it is like they'll cause so much chaos that they'll basically run kind of New York City in a way out of fear or
Mm.
whatever. But I think I'm overthinking it because I don't even know if they really thought about the overall plot of like what they were really supposed to be, because it seems much it should be more bigger than like what we get in the movie. Like, all right, well,
Agreed.
what are you guys trying to do? But like I think they do just enough to like kind of like, all right, I'll go with it. I mean, Shredder certainly looks cool. I mean, I think he's like a cool villain in this, like it because I like it's like mostly like for a while just kind of in the shadows and just like a lot of silhouette. He like looks like good for like it's not like a complete honest like replica of like what he would look like on the cartoon, but I think it works for like the movie they're making. And
Mhm.
you know, you can go back and forth about whether the voice is a little exaggerated. Like you could tell like it's kind of modulated a bit. Like that he's not really, that's not his actual voice. You can tell they just enhanced it and all that stuff.
Right.
I mean, an interesting kind of like thing that they're doing. I mean, that's why I think like it is a really kind of the combination of like, okay, we have to have this like, kind of team like fun, like, hey, they're silly and they're teenagers and like, they're cracking jokes and they love pizza and like all this other stuff, right? But they are really, invested in like, you know, helping people, right? And like they want to kind of,
Mhm.
I guess like in this movie, like they are kind of in the shadows too, right? They are kind of like secretly, going about like stopping all this stuff because like Master Splinter thinks that they have to like basically hide because like basically if they were kind of seen like kind of people wouldn't really
Mhm.
understand like who they are, and I get that implication. So I guess we're kind of seeing them at the beginning of like secretly fighting crime. um,
Right.
but honestly, like it's interesting because like their main like uh kind of antagonists, like they don't really know much about Shredder
I don't
like,
even really know
until
of his existence for quite a while.
yeah, until they learn kind of like later a bit. And it's just I think that's the interesting thing that's different from like this in the cartoon is like there's definitely a tangible like this is our villain, like we've been going against this guy for X amount of time, and like
Mhm.
there's not really a tangible connection between Shredder and the Ninja Turtles other than it's more one between Splinter because it's his own like, as silly as it might be, origin story of how he like kind of
Yeah.
was in his life at one point because Shredder killed his master when he was just a wee rat, or I guess and I know like it sounds so silly to say, and like you're kind of cracking up too, like it like saying it out loud is like so
Yes.
ridiculous, but the time that they actually put into like when he's doing the monologue about he's talking to that kid about like what happened. I'm like
Right.
I'm watching it, right? And one part of my brain is like, this is so silly. But then the other part of my brain is
But
like, but they're actually investing in this. Like, it's like important. And
right.
they're
It's his
doing the
character
best.
development. And
Yeah,
to
they're
see
doing
the
the best
little
they can.
rat act out the
Yeah.
the
And for
ninja
fights.
moves was like
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. I'm like, and this is actually like drama and angst. And I was like, sometimes I was like, I don't know what to really totally think of it, but man, it works for what
It
it
had
is. I
me
mean,
thinking all sorts of different things while I was watching. Like sometimes I was like, this looks like a music video. And then sometimes I was like, I appreciate the work and the lore that they're bringing in from the comics into this movie that like they're begging us to take seriously at times. And then
yeah.
sometimes it goes right to absolutely just completely ridiculous, like not taken seriously at all content. Like it flip flopped quite a bit. And so did my, enjoyment of it. But all in all, like I think it's all wrapped together by like just that and love of the
Yeah.
IP. But you said something a few
Yeah.
moments ago that like I would be remiss without bringing up. But this movie totally felt inspired to me. Just thinking about it now, I didn't really think about it while watching it, but just summarizing it and thinking back to scenes and more of like the setup and the
Right.
setting. It really reminded me of another movie that I watched, I think for the first time last year, which was Tim Burton's Batman. Like this New York City is very much like his Gotham.
It feels like Gotham City.
It
Yeah.
like the whole even like with the main love interest of Batman and Tim Burton's being a reporter. I can't remember her name for the life of me at this moment, but
Vicky Vale and
Vicky Vale, yes.
yeah, Vicky
Felt
Vale,
very
yeah.
much like April. And this felt like a more kid friendly version of Tim Burton's Batman to me, which I
Yeah,
am sure I'm not
yeah.
the only person to ever say that, but
No, I
it
mean
just was so
it's an
much like it.
interesting comparison too because and another reason why it was a tough sell because like it's a comic book adaptation and there weren't these. This was during a time when they weren't coming out every week. You had Superman the movie and you had Batman in '89, but like it still wasn't like a proven kind of market. Like right, like hey, like we know Superman was successful, and we know Batman was really successful, but how successful will all these be?
Right.
And and essentially, like I think there's a really kind of like still a learning curve of like what comic book movie adaptations would look like. And I think like you comparing it to
Yeah, true
Batman,
that.
I mean, this is as like, of course, like I feels weird to say dark and gritty, but like for instance, if you saw Secret of the Ooze, the second movie, it's a completely different visual beat. So I think if you watch them back to back, you're like, you would distinctly be like, oh yeah, this version of the movie of the story is very dark compared to where it goes in the sequels. So I guess like,
Okay.
I guess like, yeah, comparing it to Batman in a way, I mean, that could have been some of the inspiration of like how they want to make their New York City, and it had to be tough too because they need to make it serious and like kind of scary, but not too scary for kids. I wonder how they kind of like found like a happy like meaning on that. Like where was the line? Because like it
Mm.
it looked it is because it looks visually like it works visually. Like you to tell that it's a kind of grinchy New York City, but it also feels like it's not completely real too. Like you actually find like a nice little balance where um they don't make it too scary for children, but it definitely feels like but you get like, oh, there's crime and like this is definitely like it's
Right.
dangerous, but like not too dangerous where it would scare a child watching it. Um
Right.
yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that they went with that approach. Like it's definitely a kids movie, but they're like, yeah, but like kids are gonna have to learn about like crime syndicates and a very like
Right.
crime-ridden New York City, like much different from what they were watching on like the cartoon. And then we had to kind of incorporate these little elements from the cartoon that they'll recognize. And I don't know if it's like specific things per se, but like let's throw in silly random jokes just cause like there's definitely some like
Yes.
yeah, that was definitely made for kids. Like their reaction to like hearing about pizza and like the funny little like music cues and how they react to it. Like that's
Oh
definitely just
yeah.
like
The
made for the
music,
kids, right? And like
definitely. The music in the
yeah,
score definitely felt like made for kids. It felt very like juvenile, I guess. Definitely. It was fitting
yeah,
for like the tone overall of the show or the movie, but definitely felt like
yeah,
more evocative of like the television show. I felt. I don't
yeah.
know what the '80s show was like because I don't think I've ever really seen any of it, but at least from what I remember, the 2000s ones of being
Yeah.
definitely.
I know you kind of talked about like for you watching it, trying to like go through that kind of balance of like, oh, it's jumping from this, like it's serious, but then it's like supposed to be kid
Mm.
friendly. Do you think like one aspect of it worked better than the other? Like, were you more into like the okay, it's better when it's being silly and kind of fun, or are you kind of like, all right, I'm liking the more like serious stuff and not necessarily just the visual things. Like there's certain like story beats, like having Raphael get beat up like that and basically in the coma for like some of the movie,
Mm.
and like just like kind of Leonardo's reaction too. Like there's that whole moment where he doesn't want to leave his brother. Like April's like going through like her drawings and talking about each of them, and
Mm.
just Leonardo like feeling a lot of guilt because they had that like big fight before like he
Yeah.
gets beat up. So like that, so that's a really like again serious like story beat moment of like him feeling guilty and like not wanting to leave his brother, and like it's as serious you get in that situation. But
Right.
I
Yeah.
actually I was wondering what elements for you worked better where you're like, okay, I'm down with it being more serious, or it's better to just like look at the silly funny stuff. I think that works better
So
in the
just on the
movie.
note of that scene with Raphael getting like beat up and like comatose for a while, that was interesting for me because in the series that I grew up watching, Leo and Raphael's roles are flipped for that like plot element. It's Leo that gets
Okay.
comatose and Raphael won't leave his side and they had this big falling out before. So I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
cool that they, use that plot element in this movie, but they flip it. Like I'm not sure which one the comic had, but it was interesting to
Right.
me, like recognizing that. I remember that from the show and like, oh, that's cool. Um, but all in all, like, yeah, I know the movie, it's funny to use this like term for a kids movie of this nature, but it did suffer from like, I felt like a tonal indifference.
Yeah.
Or what's
Identity
the
crisis.
word? Identity crisis. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not knowing what kind of tone it wanted to go for, but I think it would have been more maybe appropriate for the IP for it to like remain kind of silly and goofy and more like kid oriented. But like for me, I think
Yeah.
what works for me is more of like the darker notes of it. The more when it took itself more seriously and kind of went more on like the grimy, realistic side is
Yeah.
where like I think it flourished, because that's just like generally what I'm as a viewer and consumer of this stuff. Like that's usually what I in the content that I enjoy more, is that more than the silly goofy stuff. But obviously, like if we're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I feel like it's
Yeah.
bound to it's going to appeal to kids who are probably more inclined to embrace the silly goofy nature of humanoid pizza loving crime
Yeah.
fighting turtles. Like it's hard to really argue that it ever tries to take itself seriously. But um I do think that like there's moments where it balances both, but it never really goes too much. Right when it is trying to be serious and dark, it just doesn't really cross a line of going quite far enough for for my liking, I guess, in my opinion. But I'm
Yeah.
also not really. I didn't go into this watch by any means like expecting it to do that. I just feel like this could
Yeah.
be a great PG-13. There could be a great PG-13 iteration of this somewhere, where it's not quite meant for like young kids, but more like teenagers and more adult friendly content in there.
Yeah.
Which, on the note, and I'm waiting for a segue to bring this up, and I'm not sure if we ever touched on it on camera before or if we ever did off camera, but there is a project in the works based on a different comic related to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, called like the Last Ronin. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh yeah, that was like super dark, right? It's like really like
Yeah, it's like
not
I think
not
they're
just dark,
imagining it
like, but insanely
R-rated.
violent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's in the works, and that has like one of the turtles. I won't spoil who for those that aren't familiar with it, and I don't even know the developers because it's in pre-production right now on IMDb. There is a page for it, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
which turtle they're having. But essentially, in that storyline, in that comic strand, three of them have been killed, and there's only one of them left, and he's on
Oh Jesus.
a big revenge quest to like kill like the grandson of Shredder, who's like killed the other three,
Yeah.
and Splinter I think is also dead. And it's supposed to be very dark and gritty and violent, and they're imagining it as being R-rated. I'm like, that is definitely up my alley, and like to use this IP to tell that
Yeah.
story, like that is super sweet. So
That is
I'm
certainly made for adults, man. Yeah.
yeah, I am super interested in that. I don't really know who's making it or where that is going, but it does exist, and
Yeah.
it only got announced I think like later in 2024, so we will probably
That's
have
interesting.
updates on that at some point. But that I
That's
think
really
would
cool.
really
Yeah.
be like
That's
the
like
medium,
actually like totally going there. That's not like kind of towing the line between like,
right?
oh, it's it friendly is this. Like, no, they know exactly where they're going
Hmm.
with it. Were you like keenly aware before you watched it that the I guess even visually and like the tone was a little bit more, I guess, darker than like uh even like I don't even know like maybe a lot about the sequels, but it definitely like is like you know as serious as it can be. Like, did you know that it went that route visually and like tried to go that route at least a little bit tonally too before you saw it?
I didn't really have any expectation, and definitely not really any like knowledge of it before, like at least tonally. I'd seen like stills and stuff, and I would be able to like I've seen stills of the turtles from this movie, and I would have been able to tell you, oh yeah, that's the '90s movie. I just haven't seen it, but no, I didn't
Yeah.
really know what sort of tones it would be going for. So it was really very much like a first time watch, except with the exception of being familiar with the IP and the story and everything.
Yeah.
Um, but I had my guesses that it was gonna like orient itself towards a younger audience but I think just the nature of like the intellectual property, like it does go towards like it has darker elements to it than like some other like maybe like Power Rangers or something, for
Yeah.
instance. So I expected
Yeah.
that, but like visually, I didn't expect the whole again the Batman, like the Tim Burton Batman esque visual
Yeah.
style and the darker color palette. I guess I didn't
you're,
really know what to
you're like
expect.
Gotham City by way of like Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles. uh
exactly.
it is interesting too, like the whole like, but overall, like if I had to like think of like the best sequence, it is the stuff with Raphael when he gets attacked by the
Mm,
Foot Clan, because that subsequent like just fight is just like pretty long and pretty fun, and like it's pretty chaotic, and a lot happens like from like him getting beat up, which I guess as a kid probably was pretty violent to watch because he's getting beat up pretty bad, and he gets like thrown to like a skylight, and like he's immediately just like comatose, and it's just like, oh, like as a kid you're like, wait, is he dead? Like I don't know, like what's going on, like because he looks pretty
yeah.
lifeless when they're like basically trying to like keep him safe while they're being attacked by the Foot Clan at April's place. But it is a fun. I think that sequence is a good combination of like, okay, this is a really serious kind of fighting moment for them. It does get kind of silly and wacky. I think there's one moment where I think I can't remember if it's Donatello or Michelangelo who's like they basically like lay down on the floor and they like spin in a circle and they take out like some of the fucking. And I was like, all right, that works too. It's silly. And then I do like the whole kind of like little fun showdown between Michelangelo and the one Foot Clan soldier who like
With
when they're doing the nunchucks together.
He
Yeah,
goes, oh, a fellow chucker. That was
and then
awesome.
like I just love how Cowabunga gets because like I think it's the third run where like the one guy, the Foot Clan guy, is just like you can tell just so frustrated, just clearly messing up because he's not as good as him, and it's kind of funny to watch. I mean, I think that's an interesting moment too because it's that whole sequence is totally like all over the place because it's serious. Like the brother might be like badly hurt or maybe dead, but then like they're trying to be funny with some of the stuff and how they're fighting and all that stuff. And then even like Casey Jones showing up is like it's fun that he's helping, but it's also kind of wacky. Like that's like a sequence I think that is like all over the place, but I think it's still fun. But it's definitely it's like how I think it's they're trying to be like, hey, this is serious. Like we want to keep it serious, but we want to make the kids have fun because they just watch this really serious thing happen to like a character they likely love. So like they probably had like it probably was a really tough task to do it. Whether or not they totally got it right is like open to interpretation. But I think it was that probably was their toughest job of like having to go back and forth to be like, hey, we want to like give the movie some depth and some like have them have some definite character arcs and all that stuff. But it's still a kids movie, so like you have to find like the right line, and I think that it's difficult in any adaptation, like whether this or something else. Like there is a struggle sometimes I think with kids movies to you want to appeal to kids, but adults are taking them, so like you want them to be entertained too.
Right.
So like
They're also part of the
that's
audience.
difficult.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a difficult thing, and like I think they take some swings. Some really work well. Some are like, oh, well, that's interesting. Don't know if it totally works, but they tried. So I think that's a lot to do with it. Now, for me, watching it, I mean, I can't help it. I'm watching it through like a freaking nostalgia lens, and like it's just a fun movie. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting, like I almost want to call it experiment too, because I was like it for what it is. Like this is kind of really like the most serious Ninja Turtle movie you can actually get for what it is, and like it's like how
looking
serious
back,
can you make something? Yeah, and how serious can you make something called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I think Roger Ebert's review kind of sums up kind of how you feel about it a little bit.
I did
He gave it
watch
two and a
him and
half.
Siskel's 3-minute
Yeah,
spiel there at the time it came out, and it
and
didn't seem like they really gave it much of a thought. But he gave it. What did he rate
yeah,
it?
he he gave it 2.5 out of 4 stars, and I think that was probably pretty good for him. And like his overall like blurb that I think kind of explains it. He
Okay.
goes, nowhere near as bad as it might have been, and probably is the best possible Teenage Mutant Turtle movie. It supplies, in other words, more or less what Turtle fans will expect. And then he singled out the production design, which he described as a low rent version of Batman or Metropolis. But he basically said like, this is as good of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie you're gonna get. Like this is for what the IP is and for what how silly it is. Like this is gonna be the best movie of that. And I don't think that's like if you're on the fence, that's probably like one of the better takes on it, I guess.
I am actually just more surprised that he even took the carve the time out to see this. And I'm under no apparently at the time that this came out, it was the #1 movie at the box office. So that's probably why it was very topical, because I can't imagine Roger Ebert like making the time to go see this movie if it was like #4 or lower or something. But I'm surprised to hear you like recite his little blurb there, because like a few moments before we started recording, I was like just doing some digging, and I watched, there was like a 3.5-minute video of Siskel and Ebert talking about the movie like while it had just premiered in theaters back in 1990, and both of them like what they had to say, and I didn't get to the point where I don't even think they even gave it like their thumbs up or thumbs down rating in this particular video, but it was what they had to say was like much more scathing than what you just read that he had to say.
They're
So
a little bit more like harsh on it.
they were very much like, yeah, this is like stupid, mindless action movie for kids. Like, don't waste your time. Like, anyway, it wasn't like their official review, clearly, because Ebert spoke a little bit more favorably of it. But I'm under no illusions that this would be like something that he would enjoy, like a man of his film palette, if we'll call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
trying to
definitely. I'm
imagine
in
them
line
in
with
a
what he had just said. Like for sure. Like I think it's like good for what it is. Like I'll stick to my guns. Like I think this
and
IP
that's a
is better
compliment if
suited for
you're on the
TV.
fence. It's like, hey man, if this is like as good as it's gonna get, I mean, like it's not really like a dig so much. It's like they did
No,
the best they could to adapt what this is, and this is the best
in the
version
way
of
that
what
they,
that
yeah.
could have been. Yeah, you know, they,
I gotta say, like again, I mentioned this earlier that like filmmaking wise, like this movie doesn't offer a whole lot because we're dealing with like actors in rubber suits that are pretty restricted in their mobility. Like what I appreciate about it is like the puppetry, like the effects, the choreography, and like what they were able to accomplish on a $13.5 million budget. This is a really like gambly independent movie that ended up killing it at the box office. So I gotta appreciate, the independent
yeah,
filmmaking
yeah.
behind this
I
movie. I'm not
mean,
under any
it
illusion it was trying to be like, a Transformers or something. Like,
right. It's interesting too because like so many people didn't want to do it. I mean, Fox was going to do it, and then they backed out at the last minute. So like they were like, in the middle of like, hey, we're about to start this thing, and we don't have like a studio that wants to release it, and
mm,
like we had a studio, and now it's gone. Like, what are we going to do? And New Line Cinema was, they were independent
yep,
at the time. And um, Bob Shea is a very interesting person because he on the one hand, he kind of champions these like film, but like they talk about New Line being like the house that Freddie built because Nightmare on Elm Street was their first big commercial
right.
success, and of course that turned into a huge franchise for them in the '80s, but they were still an independent studio.
Mm,
But Bob Shea, on the one hand, gave Wes Craven a very great opportunity, got his movie made, right? But
mhm.
then when it came to after that first one came out and it made money, it was very much like, well, you want to do another one? And he's like, no, I don't. And they're like, well, we're gonna do one without you. And it was just kind of like they kind of took it, where they took it. And he didn't really like negotiate a new deal with Wes Craven for a really long time. It was kind of like a whatever kind of situation thing. Like he's like, if you don't want to keep this ball running, we'll keep it rolling. Like it's a cash cow for us. They didn't like mend fences until they did Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and they worked out a deal for him to
Mm,
like kind of get retroactive pay for what he missed out up to that point.
okay.
So they did kind of talk it out. But it is an interesting thing when they came in for Ninja Turtles and Golden Harvest was like part of that put up the money, and Golden Harvest was behind like Enter the Dragon and a lot of like older like Bruce Lee martial arts movies, right? But
Okay.
they weren't huge. So they had like they fronted $6 million, and they told New Line how much more money they needed from them. And Bob Shea was basically like, yeah, you're not going to get that. You basically are coming to us because you're desperate and you need us. And here's what we're going to give you. And then really didn't give them what they wanted. And like they ended up having to cover the cost from that other production company that fronted the first half of the
Okay.
money. So I think it's interesting that Bob Shea was like, no, you need us. You're not getting that much money. You have nowhere else to go. But even though he was kind of shrewd about it, New Line knew how to promote it. They had faith in it. Um,
Clearly, yeah. The numbers in
they
this
were
movie are nuts.
they were really on board of like making it as much of a faithful adaptation of the comic book more than like the cartoon. Um, it was their idea to release it in March instead of the summer because they felt like if they released it at that time, it wouldn't be a kind of movie that would open big and then fade away. It would kind of sustain throughout you know, the early part of that year, and it did. I think it was number one for like 3 weeks in a row, and it really was a it's interesting because I guess like one of the guys said the Hunt for October actually opened a little bit ahead of them, and they had broken like a spring record with like their $17.5 million opening, and then Ninja Turtles comes out and it made what it made on opening weekend. And he talked with someone from Paramount who was bragging about the Hunt for October, and the guy at Paramount was like, "I'm just amazed and flabbergasted that this worked. Congratulations!" But they didn't know how to really congratulate them because I guess every other studio that passed on it was like, "Well, I'll be damned. I don't know how that works, but they made it work."
Yeah. I'm sure they were kicking themselves afterwards.
Yeah, and it was just like it was really one of those things that it surprised everyone, but it was like kind of like even if you weren't like a big fan of it, they said that it was just a really cool thing to see, like an independent studio release it. Um, you know, kind of marketed and maintained it as a bigger budgeted property than it appeared to be. It was an expensive movie, but they had enough marketing genius to make it appear bigger than what it was, and like they got to do all the merchandising and all that stuff. So they really kind of hit
Merchandising would have
been
completely,
insane. Yeah,
yeah,
like
it would have been skyrocketed uh,
Like,
sales of this movie for sure. And I mean, that was still the TMNT merch was still crazy when I was a kid. Like I remember lunch boxes and toys and other collabs with like restaurants and stuff,
yeah.
and then the TVs and all that stuff. Like it was still a pretty big IP
Yeah.
years
Uh,
after this movie.
what you kind of get from it though, it's interesting because like it made $25 million on its opening weekend. At that time, it was the biggest opening weekend for an individual film at that time. It went on to
Until the Blair
gross,
Witch Project, I think.
yeah, till Bears Project. And it was the second biggest U.S. opening ever up until then, after 1989's Batman. Because like the first opening week total was $32 million total, and then it just kind of like stayed and like made like it had really small drops. It made $135 million domestic and $202 million worldwide on a $13.5 million budget. I mean, that's like
It's crazy.
it's interesting to read articles about like what people thought, like industry people were proudly scratching their heads. Like they were like, okay, I don't know how it works, but it works. But they didn't really
Yeah.
understand like what it was. And like I guess like it's so weird to me that not how they didn't really get it. Cause like, like you said, the cartoon was popular but maybe this was just such a weird hybrid thing that it was just like, all right, we get it in cartoon form. Like that makes sense. It seems like it would play well in cartoon form, but how is this working the way they worked in live action? And like, I don't know. I think it also like another example, like you don't really underestimate like the youth audience either. Like it's a kid movie, but it's a little bit more adult than like a kid movie, and like they seem to get it. I mean, it definitely wasn't their Ninja Turtles that they watched on Saturday mornings, like as a cartoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's way different, but I think close enough that the characters were close enough that hey, they're still seeing their favorite characters like in live action. The personalities are pretty much the same. They're it's even some of the voices sound fairly accurate. It's interesting that Corey Feldman does the voice of Donatello. I mean,
I know,
I didn't know that
yeah.
for years. I didn't know that for years. Like, 'cause I remember like when we were younger, I was like, one of my friends like that sounds like Corey Feldman. And we never looked it up. Don't know why. And then one random time years later, I was like, oh, it is Corey Feldman. That's random, but
I looked
you
that
know,
up beforehand. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat that he's in this.
yeah, and the voice work is good. Like they sound like even like don't sound completely like they do in the cartoon, but close enough where you're like, okay, I get it. Like Michelangelo definitely sounds like Michelangelo, and like it's close enough. I think the overall vibe worked for kids, even if it was a bit different from what they were expecting. And it's also exciting to see something like that on the big screen. Like it's really cool for kids to be like, hey, it's a you know in live action form, and then yeah, I mean it's not a hard nut to crack, I guess, for children, but it definitely works
Right.
for them. I think.
Um, on that note, there is something that I read that I thought was super interesting, and like I don't know about a missed opportunity, but like in another universe, I feel like this is how they did this, and I wanted to know if you think that this would work or if it would be like a disaster. But so a few years before, I think it was a couple of years before, Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, and that was a very innovating. I want to say Robert
Yeah.
Zemeckis did it, but I'm not actually
Yeah, he
sure who
did.
did.
Yeah.
Did he? Okay.
Back when he
And
made good movies.
that very famously like had animated characters interacting with live action
Actually,
performers, and I don't think that had really been done before. If it had, I
yeah.
don't know, but apparently that was at one point pitched for how to make this movie and ditch the rubber suits and have them be animated and interacting with just the actors in live action roles. What do you think
Yeah.
about if that had gone forward? Do you think that's a smart approach? Do you think that would have been a disaster? Do you think it would have made a difference? Like, I think that was really interesting pitch,
It's
but
it's interesting. I mean, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was successful too. I mean, like, and it's
mm,
interesting how successful that movie was. Like, was nominated for Oscars and all like that and all that stuff. And they never really made a. Not saying that they should have, but it never even got like
mhm,
a proper sequel or anything. Like, it was like this big thing for what it was. It's extremely innovative, and then that kind of was it. And like other movies tried to do that and then weren't as successful. There's a movie called Cool World that came out in like the early '90s that was a
okay,
combination of like live action and animation. And I think it works in theory, but I wonder like that. I think it would have been cool. I think it would have made money. They would have saw it, but I just wonder how if it's the same kind of story tone, like how that would have worked. Like as far as like telling a grounded story, but also kind of making it that way. Like if it
mm.
could totally work with like half animation, half live action, like you know, I think it would have made money, but I wonder, do you think one would have worked out better than the other? Because I know you already have you know, a little bit about Who Framed Roger Rabbit and how that looked and like how
Yeah, no,
successful
I
that
haven't
was.
seen
And
it, so I don't know how. the animated characters, like how it looks visually, them
It's pretty
interacting with.
seamless for that time. I
Is
mean,
it? Yeah.
it's yeah, for that time. I mean, it's always interesting when you're watching stuff like that. Like, yeah, I just think this is like what 88 or something like that when it came out, like in the late 80s. So you're like, I had to like, okay, the year this came out, this is like really cool and really innovative. I had to like
Right.
watch movies like that and not think of like, well, it's 2025 and does that work now? But like you really have to watch certain movies like that. I mean, it's just easy for you talking about this
Mm.
movie. You're like, yeah, it came out in 1990. I know it has to be hard to be like, okay, I have to think about it being a product of the year is made, but you're also being like, I, you know, I didn't grow up
It's
with
not
it.
something I struggle
It's
with
this
anymore.
year.
It used to be, and I know, like, I still
Yeah,
have friends that would look at this and be like, "This looks like garbage." Like, I'm not watching this, but like, I
yeah,
don't really have the difficulty separating watching something as a product of its time versus what we have now because I don't know. There was a time in my life where I would have had trouble, differentiating that, but
yeah,
not anymore. I think it would be an interesting pitch. I just wonder, like, I don't know that I have enough examples to go off of to see if I would think that it would look better or worse, but I would like to see a version of that exist. I think ultimately, like, the decision they made worked, paid off. So I would like to say that they made the right one. And as much as like the turtles look uncanny nowadays, like
yeah,
I think like I said, they have a charm to them, and it wouldn't be the property that it is without the character design that they have, and
yeah,
it's still an impressive feat of puppetry and effects making. So I don't know. I think it would be interesting to see an animated and live action kind of combo, like with Who Framed
yeah.
Roger Rabbit. But I don't know. I was interested to see if you heard that that was an approach at one point, or if you think that
Yeah,
that would
I
be an
actually
absolutely
hadn't
wrong move.
I hadn't heard that, but like I think I don't know if it would have been completely wrong. Like, I think they could have made it work,
Mm,
and I think it will have been successful because like I think and that would have been probably an easier initial sell maybe because it's like it's animated too, so it's still kind of like the cartoon and like you have like that kind of vibe with it still.
right.
I think there is a universe where that could have worked, but I wonder if they would have kept the same story and like tone if that would have like
Yeah, I think that that might have also
if that would have blended well
with
together.
the
But
tone. Yeah, I think that might have been an issue, but
but yeah, I think that is really interesting that they could have gone that route. I did want to mention 'cause I know we talked a little bit about Shredder as a villain and all that stuff, and then talked briefly about Splinter. But what did you think of overall him as a villain? I thought it was interesting too. Like there's all this buildup, right? Because they eventually have to fight. They have to face him, and it's like when I was watching it today. I mean, I'm half my brain is like, oh, this is so cool. Like it's all dramatic. Like he jumps down. It's a big deal, right?
right.
Like he's finally facing them. And then I'm watching it, the other half of my brain was like, this is so like not as epic as it could be. Like it's like really short-ish
It
compared
is
like
really short.
and it's kind of like it's so and the buildup is interesting because like they don't have like this isn't like their main enemy, right? This is like their first time really engaging with him. So uh it is interesting that he kind of throws Splinter in their face and like basically says that he murdered him and like there's that tension that's interesting, but like
Yeah.
um it it definitely I think falls a little short as like what it could have been, but it feels like a little rushed. I guess it's like, hey, we gotta get them. They have to fight eventually, and the movie's only like
Yes.
what 90
An
some
hour
odd
and a half
minutes. So
long.
like here we
Yeah,
go,
exactly.
here we go. Like I want to know what you kind of thought of like if you thought there was like enough there for him to be a good villain, or like if it kind of was like for you
Yeah,
as far as
I found it underwhelming. It really the battle should have been between Shredder and Splinter. It's really their stories. Like he has
right,
no other than like kidnapping Splinter and I wouldn't even really say torturing him, but like having him captive. That's really the only like tension that's between Shredder and the Turtles in the first place.
yeah,
So there wasn't really feel like it built
sorry,
towards anything between the two of them. So or like the
yeah,
Turtles and him. So if anything, like their beef is like with the Foot Clan, like the soldiers rather than Shredder. He doesn't really do much to them, but like we do get admittedly a little bit late into the movie, but the backstory
yeah,
between Shredder and Splinter really set the framework for what should have been
makes it personal, right?
yeah, exactly. It should have the conclusion should have been between them and but anyway, it didn't really matter. I do think the fight was a little bit underwhelming. I love how you get like they're attacking him one on one and he's like deflecting them like with like one little
Yeah,
solid
and
hit, and like
there's no real like structure to how they're attacking him. It's just like they just kind of
no,
go at it, and it's interesting what I think what they're trying to show, right, is that yeah, they are as skilled as they could be as Ninja Turtles, but I guess it's supposed to show that he is more skilled than they are. But it is interesting what he does to kind of deflect them isn't really like all that like fancy or unique. It's kind of very like he almost like kind of tosses them around,
yeah,
and with like
it did
with no
feel
rhyme
like
or reason.
exactly like kind of like an effortless endeavor there at the
Yeah.
end.
I
But
do.
oh
I
well,
mean, it is interesting though, like because when he hops out, it's just so dramatic in the music, and like I think even sometimes it's like, oh, like shit's about to go down, and it doesn't really like quite go down in the way you thought it would. I do think it's interesting that they individually attack him, and then like
hmm,
when they cut back to the fight again, like the music kind of the score is kind of kicking up. The fight looks a little bit more intense, but it's not really like like I said, there's one like flesh wound. I think Leonardo gets shredded in the arm, and that's about it.
yeah,
Um, and the taunting them is interesting. It makes it very personal for them because like that's their father essentially, right?
right,
Um, there is some plausibility issues I think because like Splinter looks pretty weak and messed up when Casey Jones saves him.
yes,
He
agreed,
looked like he had to like prop him up, like he could barely like move, and somehow he like got on that roof real quick and was able to like strategically flip Shredder over the ledge somehow, even though he's old. I don't know. I guess he
yeah,
doesn't really have to explain it, but I thought that was funny. I was like, he was like near death like 2 seasons ago, and now he's like,
exactly. And now he's fighting Shredder.
yeah. And also,
Um,
it's a happy accident that like when Michelangelo throws his nunchuck and it like wraps on that, like that's like that was really planned. So like, I guess it just shows that Splinter is like strategic in the crisis. I was like, oh well,
yeah,
he didn't know that would be there. So whatever. I mean, it is what it is. They do. I
I
mean, I guess like you did mention that like the fight should have been between them, and like I guess like they do make the final moment of like
yeah. So that
yeah
puts a nice
yeah
bow on it, but it felt like
but it
really
wasn't really even a fight per se.
no. It should have been more of a showdown and
Yeah,
like some more personal, jabs thrown at each other. But one thing I was really surprised to see is how Shredder is like taken out with Casey Jones kind of like casually
um,
compacting him in the back of a garbage
yeah,
truck. I was like,
just casual
what
murder
is this
in a
going? Yeah,
children
that
casual
would
murder in a
be
children's film.
catastrophic. I was like, this is so violently like
Yeah,
subtle, but like horrific way to
yeah.
go. And
It
he's just
does
sitting
it
there like
so casually as a
Afghanistan
joke.
history.
Like, whoops.
I was
Like, it's
like,
just like,
what? That is insane.
I always had to laugh at that. I was like, yeah, they gets crushed to death. Like,
Yeah, that would
and
be an
and it's not like
absolutely horrific death.
and it's not like they like show it, but they show enough of his like
You
little
know what's
helmet thing getting
happening.
crushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that was I thought that was interesting too. I was like, oh, they went there. I mean, it's not like graphic, but it's
Mm.
definitely legit murder in a children's film, and done as a joke. Like the whole like whoops,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Over
yeah,
a guy
I
that just like orchestrated a bunch of like petty thieves. It's not like
yeah
he's a big, I know in like I think in the comics and like the IP in general, Shredder is more of like a criminal mastermind, but like in the
right
context of this movie, he's not really that big of a threat, I would say,
yeah
that warrants like that sort of ending execution. But
yeah. My buddy always
anyways,
like I was like texting my buddy while I was watching it, and he was just saying like he's like love that movie. Like he's like 5 out of 5 no notes. I know that's like me being a kid rating it, but he said he
yeah,
always finds it funny when like Splinter is on the roof and he's like explaining to him like kind of like that "Do you remember me" kind of speech, and he was like, I just love that he like distinctly remembers in that moment like that's that motherfucking rat that was like in that little cage that scratched my face. Like it's just so like
yeah,
he said it's so weirdly deeply personal.
yeah.
He's just a rat. And like in the way he
Why is it
remembers him,
5 feet tall now?
yeah, like he remembers him in a way that like he wants vengeance for like for that. Like
Right.
it's so dramatic and like big. I just think it's funny that they wanted to make it. They wanted to give it some like I don't know, like I guess depth and
Wait,
like
like,
kind of like
yeah,
weight, emotional weight. But it like when you really sit down and think about it, it's like that's so silly. But I mean,
yeah.
at least they tried. I mean, it is what it is.
Mhm.
They wanted to give it a little bit more like story and all that stuff. But I mean, they could have done nothing at all and just had it been silly and wacky and like you know, I kind of do like the attempts to like give it a little bit more character and heart and humanity. Like I mean, like, I think that's what some people do really like about it. I mean, like you really do get the bond of them as brothers. You really do feel their love for Splinter. Like they love him, and those
Mhm.
scenes are really genuine. Like when they actually reunite with him at the end, they're hugging him. They're like, you have to have a heart made of stone. They're like, oh, that's kind of that's adorable a little bit. Like
Yeah.
they got their dad back, and they get to end it on a really funny, silly note with the whole like, yeah, you finally get to hear Cowabunga, and like
Yeah,
how they
yeah. I
end
was waiting for
up.
that the whole time.
And like I'm sure that I don't quite remember, but I'm sure they got like a nice big applause from kids when the movie came out. They finally
Mhm.
hear that's the word they did the line. So
Yeah.
it's like a fun little wrap up. I think it's like a fun little thing with the human characters too. Like April O'Neil and Casey Jones have nice chemistry. They don't need to have red hot chemistry. It's a kids movie. They have enough
Right.
like
Exactly.
playful witty banter. They it's interesting because she gets replaced in the second one by another actress, and that actress is, I guess, like on paper, like prettier than her and looks like, feels a little bit more April O'Neilish.
Okay.
But the first actress, even though like she is different in look and like tone from like, how you remember from like the cartoon and all that, she
Mm.
plays the role a bit better. Like you can tell like um she invested as much as you can be invested in like a role like that. She's clearly having fun and like
Oh, for
uh
sure.
Casey Jones is having fun. The guys playing him is having fun too. I mean, I think they know what they were making for sure. And like,
I
yeah,
think so too.
yeah. I think it worked out for the most part. Where because usually sometimes the human characters can get thrown in the background. Like the movie's all about you guys. They want to see
No,
the
but they
turtles
are
and
quite strong in this too. And Casey Jones too. I was interested to see what you think about his character because the older I get, the more like I never really like when I was watching the show and the movies as a kid. Like I was obviously in it for the turtle characters. Like I was just waiting for Leo to be back on screen. He was always my favorite, and I couldn't really.
yeah,
As a human character, Casey Jones was like one of the better ones, but he was never a character I was huge on. But I find the older I get, the more I enjoy his character. So I thought it was cool, and to see an actor that I recognize play him in this movie too, with
yeah,
Elias Codius, who
yeah,
I think he's in The Wire is what I really know him from. He's in Shooter. He's in a couple like
yeah,
really sneaky good films. He's always been like
yeah.
a
I
reliable
thought
guy that's thought it was an A-lister, but
I thought it was a pretty good rendition of that character. I mean, like he looks
yeah, I thought
cool.
he was. Yeah, he looked
Uh,
sweet. His mask was really cool.
Yeah, I think they rendered that pretty well. I like that they have him interact with Raphael first because like that kind of banter like really works to have them meet
Agreed.
initially and stuff. And I think they did like I think that kind of it's much better than the Stephen Amell one from that second Michael Bay movie. It's just like he doesn't really feel like Casey Jones,
I
Stephen
can't
Amell,
even remember him.
and it's definitely like I'm not a huge Stephen Amell fan. I used to love Arrow, but like he is, I just don't like him personally. It's hard for me to like watch
Oh,
his
okay,
stuff
yeah.
because he's a bit. I've met him before, and uh he's a little cocky. I mean, he's arrogant.
Is that right?
He actually used to be. He is still friends with someone I know. I used to know pretty well. And that's how I met him.
Okay.
And like you know, it's not like one of those situations where it's like, oh, don't meet your heroes. He wasn't a hero of mine, but when I did meet him, I was just like, oh, you are
Oh, okay.
arrogant. Yeah,
Mm,
like yeah.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, his take on Casey Jones was like much more different, and it really felt like Casey Jones. At least this felt like you
Yeah.
know how I
Felt
thought
like
he would be.
the comic version of what that character
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. I thought that was a rendition of that. And actually, the stuff with Splinter is actually like you know the puppetry on that it looks really good. And like when he is like being like beat up, essentially tortured by while he's being
Mm,
hung up by Shredder and all that, you kind of do feel bad. Like they make him look weak enough where you kind of feel this pain. You feel like sorry for him. Like
right.
they rendered that pretty well. And like I thought that was gave that character a bit more humanity to I don't know, man. It's hard for me not to like I think the movie's fun. I can't really like look at it and like it's so I can't dissect it in a way where it's like, oh, like it's this, it's that. I
I
don't think
know I
I
do find it challenging to review because of like my love for the IP, but like my disdain for like the quality of the filmmaking. But it's not meant to be like I get it. It's a $13 million independent movie, like
yeah,
based on like a ridiculous premise in the first place. And I think what for what it is, like they do a good job of making it entertaining
yeah,
and bridging the gap between like a, a child audience and an older audience that can still have fun while watching it. So for all intents and purposes, like I think they did a decent job.
yeah. And yeah, I said like by the end of the discussion, like how would I feel? I think it's a great film, or is it cinema? It's not. I can say that it's not like, but I think like for like the attempt that they made to kind of like not just make like a colorful kid movie, and like because they could have and like just
Hmm.
gone with that. I loved like the swing of like, all right, let's make it as much of a dark, gritty kind of crime thriller as we can. And that probably was a tough sell, but I think they, for the most part, at least in look like visually, some of it looks it's visually interesting and all that. Um, it's hard for me not to look at it like through nostalgia lens, though. I mean, it was such a I not only did I apparently see it 3 times in theaters, like by the time it came out on VHS, I'm pretty sure I wore that
Ran through
VHS
that.
tape
Yeah.
out.
Well,
Yeah, and then, I
nostalgia points
had
are
it on.
good here too.
Yeah, and I think like it's hard not for for some of us to not look at it that way. I mean, it becomes like a part of your like life in a different way. And
Mhm.
I had it on VHS and I had it on DVD. Now I have it on Blu-ray, and like
Oh wow.
it's yeah, it's stayed in my life since I was like a wee one. And I like
Mhm.
I'm watching it for this, and I'm like I'm trying to watch it as like an adult, but it was hard not to like just be taken back to like how fun this was as a kid. And like it's a nice breezy 90 minutes. It's like it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's fun.
Right.
I mean, it's never boring. Uh yeah, we're definitely gonna have like different views on it because like it's just like the timing of it. Like you grew up with
Yeah. 100%.
the different version of the IP. Like this wasn't like your Ninja Turtles. Like this was,
That's
I guess, mine. And like it
exactly right.
yeah, people listening to this, I know you're gonna be like, it's gonna seem like Jackson didn't love it. But it definitely, that's what makes these interesting though, because like you're gonna look at it differently. It came
Ex-
out in
yeah.
1990. You didn't grow with it, and growing up with it has a lot to do with like how you kind of view it. I think
Exactly.
it's just like, and I think you're also like smart enough to like kind of respect the attempt of creative swings that they took, like and all that. But like, even if you don't think they all worked, it's probably like, oh, that's interesting that that's the route they took instead of like just doing just like a straight adaptation of the cartoon or something. Like, you at least could see that. So you're good at addressing it, but yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you're also honest. It's like, hey, like some of that worked for me. Some of it definitely did it. It was definitely like total
100%.
whiplash.
And I
But
completely agree. Like a big part of how a movie holds up over time for you is like your attachment that you had to it and when you watched it and how much of a part of your life it was when you saw it. And I have no doubts that if I grew up like watching this on TV all the time, I would probably hold a little bit more weight to it, like nostalgia wise. But like this is just one of those cases where like my first time watching it, like I can admire it for like its contribution to like the grand Teenage Mutant Ninja
yeah,
Turtles IP, and I recognize that it has a
keeping
spot.
it going.
Yeah, exactly. But like, did I love it as a film? Like, no, but like there was definitely parts of it that I was entertained and charmed by, and that I
Yeah,
appreciated the value that I got out of the watch without a doubt. But
yeah.
yeah, I am dying to know like how does this hold up over the years? I know you said that you've seen this like throughout the
So
years, but
many,
how much of a
so many
gap
times. Dude.
has it
There,
been
this
since
was
you last seen it?
this was a bigger. Yeah, it's like, I mean, well, like it's big for me. I think the last time I watched it was during COVID, so it'd be like
Oh wow,
2020.
okay.
So so I guess that'd be like 5 years.
That's crazy to
And
me that it was that long
but
ago.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that feels
those
like a
COVID
totally
years.
different fucking time, man. Like
It really
a
was like a lifetime ago.
weird fucking blip.
Yeah,
But I've seen it a lot. Like
right.
it's one of those like comfort movies. I think there was a period where like, hey, I don't know what I want to watch. I just need something on in the background that I just know. I don't necessarily have to like look at it the entire time. I can work on something and it'll just be on. It would used to be that kind of movie too. I just want to throw it on
Mhm.
because I just want to listen to something fun and I know it and it's familiar and it's easy. It's breezy. I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting one to rate. I have like I'm in my head. I'm like, do I rate this as like how I feel as the kid in me, or like am I rating like it as a film? And it's gonna be like it's not playing. I'm just gonna wing it. I am struggling with it right now though. Like where
Is that right? Yeah.
what's fair to rate it? Because like we still want to be like an authority on the podcast, like how we rate these movies.
Right.
But
And
we
consistently, but like not every movie is
right
created equally, right? So
right. So it's definitely hard because like you know. Uh,
I agree. I could go first if you
uh,
want.
yeah.
And
It'll be interesting, and like, yeah, and always
and
remember that that Jackson scores aren't always like that was pretty bad. Like you do a good job explaining, like, hey, that was like a when I give it this,
Yeah.
I mean like a pretty like decent like 2.5. Like, you
Yeah.
always like try to
Well,
yeah.
even my rate, like while discussing it, like throughout the episode, like I'm upping it up probably half a point from what I initially thought, because when I watch it, like, yeah, like I watched it today, I wasn't like as invested. I was like recognizing a lot of the plot points from the show and like relating to that, and like part of the nostalgia from like the earlier like 2000 show came out and got me through the watch, and like just and the video game that I used to play a lot too, and like hearing some of
Yeah.
the same catchphrases and stuff, like just like watching a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie for
Right.
at least a little bit was like nostalgic and good. But like again, combining the elements from that with like the filmmaking and blending that all under one package and giving it a rating, like I'm gonna give it a 2, like a solid. Like I enjoyed it. It's not something I'm gonna really return to any time soon, but it did kind of reignite like the love for the IP for me, and I really kind of want to seek out the show and like revisit it a little bit. And it's always
Yeah.
going to be an IP that holds a special place in my heart because I grew up like loving TMNT. So, I'm
Yeah.
glad that I have absolutely aspirations to watch The Hunt for Red October, but I'm on the side of the listeners. It's an
Yeah.
interesting movie that again kind of bridged the gap in our collective childhood experiences. And I'm glad that we got,
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
excuse to watch
In
something
in a
like that.
different way too. Yeah.
Meant different
Really like
things to us, but
yeah.
yeah.
Very
So
very different and unique way. I think that's like I don't
exactly.
think we really had like even though we talked about older movies, I think this is one of the first time where it's like, oh, like we're both familiar with it from childhood, but just in a very different, like, you know,
Exactly.
different direction, the kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it is, it's been a part of our lives and for a long time. It just, different aspects of it. And like that is a very unique thing to have. I know like people like Merck and my buddy David, they were like, oh, that too hurt. Like they're like, they're gonna feel that.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine the collective sigh, but it
yeah,
is what it is.
but you're always honest, so I respect that. You're not going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to give it this," to like not make anyone mad, and you're not like mad at
No,
anybody.
like
Like you're like, "Oh, I
no,
hated it. It
exactly. This
too."
is
Yeah,
my
yeah,
opinion means nothing. It's just my
yeah,
thoughts, but no, it's a good too.
yeah. Don't worry, guys. He didn't go like this movie was trash. Like it's not like that.
No, not at all.
uh,
But be true to yourself. Like, what do you think? How did it hold up? What's
yeah.
your score? No
I can't
pressure.
like I can't give it like a full. I'm not gonna give it a perfect score. I'm giving it a nostalgia friendly 4.5 stars, and that's only
Nice.
because like,
Okay.
and that's like I'm not saying it's like great cinema.
No, but it doesn't always have
It's
to be to
it's
get
not
that lovable
reinventing the wheel or
score.
anything, but it's man, it's just fun, and like
Yeah.
I think it's a
Some
really
movies just
unique.
hit that spot and scratch that itch, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a really unique thing when you have like even as an adult, where you have a movie that can take you back and make you feel like a kid again. I think that's really fun, unique things about certain movies where
Exactly.
and that's why I think you too in a certain way, like that's part of like you respect that magic of film that it can do that. Some movies can do that. And
100%.
you know, and that's I think it's cool. And then maybe that's like just that's the best thing I could say about it. Like you want to feel like no matter how old you get, you still want to feel like a kid again sometimes. Like it's a very like innocent time of your life where it's just like, hey, this is like you're not really a lot of cares and worries and stuff. And like
Yeah,
it's cool to feel like that for like 90 minutes, I guess. So
it
like
is.
it's
And it's not everything can transport you back to feeling that way. And it's like truly magical. That's why it's movie magic, right? Like it's very
right.
rare that something other than like a visual medium can
Yeah.
make you feel that way. So, I completely understand the nostalgic rating and how it makes you feel. Like, absolutely, I have many movies that make me feel that way as well.
Yeah. And it's very interesting too, because like my brother's a good example. So the first two movies he actually saw were the Michael Bay ones, and actually had to go back and like watch uh the 1990
Yeah, that
movie,
one would be very
and then the
different
second, yeah, and the second one and the
take.
third one, is really bad. Like I can't even like justify it. The second,
Apparently, it
yeah,
doesn't officially
turtle,
exist in a lot of
yeah,
people's.
Turtles in
Yeah,
Time is so bad. And the second one, I mean, it's very much a different movie, but it's fun. It's certainly not. It's not serious at all, and Vanilla Ice is in it, and you get the ninja rap. And that's fun.
okay,
It's
sweet.
very interesting. It's very interesting. Um, but yeah, he ended up enjoying them though. I mean, I was surprised. I thought like maybe he would like this feels. I mean, no matter if someone's younger, it's gonna be hard for them to like not watch like, oh, that feels old. I can tell this is old. but I think
Right.
he just like the spirit of it is what he likes. So I think that is actually interesting to like you
It's a
watch
good
these
way of
kind of
putting
like
it.
yeah, I think it's interesting that you watch these clearly much more like polished and more expensive things first, and then you go back and watch something that was definitely like cheaper, but like practical
Mhm.
effects is always great, and that's what they at least they did that.
That's
Um,
right.
so I remember showing it to him. You're watching a movie like that with someone, whether it's your family or like friends, and like you're sitting there next to him, just hoping like, hope he likes it, hope he likes it, hope he likes it, like wondering what it's going to be like. Like you're excited, but then you're like looking at him, like I can't tell if he likes it or not. And then
Right.
by the time it was over, I was like, oh, he was like, yeah, I liked it. So I was like, I'm surprised. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of see that, and like, and for him too, like he's watched Ninja Turtle stuff from being a kid even till now, and like
Mhm.
just discovering different aspects of the IP at different times. Like it's crazy how it still exists and it's still so popular. Like it's something
Yes, and
that
there's
may
still
never
works
go
being
away. Yeah,
developed like 40 years on. I'm not even sure how old the comic is. Like I'm sure obviously it predates the 80s show, I would imagine, but
yeah,
it's a strong IP still going and more to look forward to. And like I said, like I'm sure we'll be covering that the last Ronin project that's in
yeah.
development because that sounds awesome and kind of a
And
very much
not made
different
for
take.
children.
Not made for children. Yeah, it's just a different, and that's the beauty about comics that I was thinking about earlier because I was obviously
Yeah,
thinking about that and about how to bring that up in the episode, and just got me thinking about comic books and like how unique they are as a medium that you can take the same characters and basic plot elements and basically
yeah,
warp them into anything you want. And this is so rare to be able to do that. So
yeah,
and then just to adapt movies off different comic strands is like super neat that we get to do that. So I'm really looking forward to what they spin out with that. I hope it's a project that like doesn't face many significant delays and kind of
yeah,
gets they get the ball rolling on it because like there's not much on IMDb about it, truthfully, but it is in pre-production. But that's
yeah.
about all we
I hope they
know.
don't
But
get I hope they don't get cold feet. Like, oh, I wonder if it's gonna work with audience. And like, is this
yeah,
too left of center too dark? I'm like, it sounds interesting. I just want them to go for it if they're gonna do it because it sounds like
yeah.
definitely not your
Seem
children's
it
Ninja
sounds like
Turtles,
a
but it'd be really
streaming
interesting though.
movie to me, but I'm still down
Yeah,
for that.
yeah, it'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys picked it as your listeners pick. So it was fun.
Congratulations, Sue, on your
Uh,
win this month.
I wanted any excuse to watch it and any excuse to talk about it. And like again, like I think it becomes like interesting discussion for us to like explore these movies that like are definitely like you know different generations, kind of like years apart for us. Like I grew up with something you didn't, and kind of see how it looks through my lens and through your lens. So if anything, it leads to like an interesting discussion, even if like you didn't fall in love with it. So I think that's what is the most important thing about like looking at these like older movies, like for us at least. So
Mhm.
definitely leads to like the interesting chat. And like you said, you were surprised at how popular it actually was. Like, were you really like whoa, like this is big for people who really enjoyed it back then?
Yeah, I guess like I didn't have a concept of how popular it was before my time. Like I knew that it existed before the
Yeah,
2003 show, but I had no concept of, how beloved was this? How many people were going to the theaters to see this? Was this a straight to DVD release? Like I had really no idea as to how popular it was. So when I saw those numbers compared against its budget, I was like, oh my God, that
yeah,
is quite impressive.
yeah. You're like this was like a hit. It
Yeah.
didn't make like a little
But
money. Like it
I didn't
was,
realize that New Line Cinema like had its origins as an independent studio because I saw that like their studio picture like at the beginning, like their little opening in the beginning of the movie. It's like
yeah,
New Line Cinema produced this. This is I did
yeah.
not expect that, but I didn't realize that they had their start as a little independent studio.
Definitely, man.
So neat history behind
It's
it.
so weird for me to like look at this as an indie
Yeah.
movie. I mean, I know I get it based on like the budget and it was an independent studio, but when you think of indie movies, you think it's something completely different. I'm like, oh, this was an independent
Yeah.
film. Like this is so like crazy to think. Like, but really fun, unique
It's a
time though. Like,
unicorn of a movie for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
you
for
don't get
sure.
these all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you can close this on up,
Yeah.
Jackson. You got through Ninja Turtles, mostly for our listeners and for me, so appreciate
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure, and I'm glad we got to do it.
it.
And looking forward to see what we have to pitch to the listeners for April's anniversaries. I know we'll be looking at that next before we're done for the night, but
Yeah.
yes, without any further ado, guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of Back to the Blockbuster. This was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990 and episode 231 of the show. So thank you guys for joining us on another episode. It's at that time now where we're getting close to 250, so stay tuned. I'm sure we are going to be brainstorming ideas for that 250 episode mark, which, as we know, is fast approaching. It always gets here closer than we think, and very exciting time for the show.
Crazy to think about.
I know. It's like I remember when we were recording episode 100 and how fast that crept up on us, and we're miles ahead of that now. Yeah, so it's been a great time for the show. Lots of new things being discussed behind the scenes, some changes coming this year that we're really excited to get to you guys. And of course, as always, big thanks to our playlists, our network. They look after us. They make the show possible. So give them a listen, guys. You can find their app on any device that you guys have, just at your app store there. So give them a listen. And thank you to all the other networks that sponsor the show and where you guys can stream it. We owe thanks to a lot of different hands, and particularly playlists. So it's great. 230 other episodes for you guys to check out wherever you guys listen to your podcasts. And without further ado, Gaius, always a pleasure. Congrats again on your listeners' pick being the vote for March. And I'll see you soon here off camera.
Yep, sounds good, buddy. Peace.
All right. Take care, guys.
We were awesome!
Bodacious!
Yeah! Good shit!
Yeah!
Gnarly! Radical!
Yeah!
Totally toothless, dude! Wicked! Delicious! Mega!
I have always liked Cowabunga.
Huh?
Cowabunga!
I made a funny.
On the half shell, they're the heroes for. In this day and age, who could ask for more? The crime wave is high, with muggings mysterious. All police and